The Magma Chamber.
Yep.
Welcome, everybody. This is the official debut of the Magma Chamber, Fantasy Volcanoes spin-off podcast. Today we're going to be talking about trade grades in our Dunes Dynasty, PhD, Pittsburgh, Hawaii, Delaware, I guess now, Dynasty teams. 16-team league. Got a bunch of Hawaii folks, Pittsburgh folks all over now. A couple North Carolina guys, Tennessee, everything. So, a few trades in 2021 so far. Actually, 4. I got my co-host Alex Wadapaka Oli Perez with me. How you doing, man?
I was very impressed by the introduction so far. This was literally his first take. I will say, you don't need to introduce everybody. Everybody knows who they are already, but so far, so good.
All right. He's grumpy. We know. Here's our first trade, specifically asked for by Alex. Wanted the Brett and Justin trade. I think you had a little bit of personal take on this because you were also involved in discussions with Justin, right?
No. Okay, so first of all, let me make my point very clear that no personal bias is going into my judgments of these trades. Completely unbiased. Just ignore everything that I may have factored in that was involved in this. Before we get started, I feel like it was very important to point out why we are the ones that are doing the podcast. And like, what is our credentials, right? So if you go to our league history, and take a look at the highest all-time weekly high scores, you will find that me and Cassidy account for 80%, 8 out of 10% of the highest scores in history. So I feel like that gives us some validation of why we're the ones doing this podcast.
Yeah, Alex accounts for 70%, but I'll combine to be 80%. That's cool.
you do have number 2, so you're not terrible. Yeah. Anyways, yes, let's get into the trade. So when looking at a trade, I try not to judge it in isolation. I feel like you have to judge it on the context of each individual team. So whether or not they're like a contender or they're trying to rebuild, whatever. So in a sense, both teams could technically be classified as a winner if it improves what they're trying to do with their team. For example, our trade last year, I got your first round pick, which allowed me to improve my team in order to try to win a championship. Meanwhile, you got Brian Edwards to stack your team with more unnecessary rookies, which I assume was your goal. Win-win. No comment.
Yeah, seemed like a win-win for me at the time. Definitely lost that trade, but it was a gamble.
In the same vein, I think both teams could be classified as losers. So thankfully, 2 of our managers in our league were nice enough to provide an example, and that's where Brett and Justin come in.
Whew. How are they both losers?
Okay, so let's start with Justin or Brett. Who did you give a grade to?
Okay, so
you want to start with your grade?
Sure, I gave grades to everybody because I'm not as much of an egomaniac, and I think that I can provide this with and show my thinking behind these things. I think Brett did very well. I gave him a better grade than Justin in this case because I think Brett's the one who earned value in this particular trade. I'll let you talk about what he needs to do with that value later. The 103, clearly he's getting Chase, Najee, or ETN, depending on what Drew takes with
but
the
he's
first
not. He's not getting Najee, Travis, is he?
I mean,
that's
most
not a
likely
point that
not.
you can make. Like, we know he's getting Jamar Chase.
Okay, well, I'm
and,
not.
And then if he doesn't get Jamar Chase, then he's clearly getting an F.
Oh well, yes. Okay, so he's getting Jamar Chase in the 103. That's who he's trading away here. But he gets 3 first-rounders, 2 future firsts, a late first-rounder here, and Mike Gesicki. And I think he could have had the 115 instead of Mike Gesicki. Whether or not you value a late first over Gesicki or not, that's up to you. But he wanted the tight end. That's clearly a haul for a rookie we've never seen play it down in the NFL, right? Didn't Jamar Chase opt out of the 2021 season? We haven't seen this guy play since over a year ago, 15 months ago at this point. So I think that Brett has earned himself an A- in this trade for the amounts of value that he is receiving for a player we've never seen.
I think you make a good point about Jamar Chase. I think most people would say he's a slam dunk prospect, but literally he's played 1 good season.
Right.
And that was the season that literally everybody did good at LSU. So it's not saying much. And And obviously he's going to have high draft capital, but like even within the last like 2 years, there's several first round wide receivers that don't look as good as Jamar Chase, like N'Keal Harry, Henry Ruggs, and Jalen Reagor, who have clearly disappointed. So we're putting a lot of stock into one player. That's all I'm saying.
Right. For Justin on the other side, I'm giving him a B plus here because he wants to move in. He has multiple firsts. He still is maintaining 4 firsts in this draft class. He just doesn't have a first now in 2022, so he's kind of diving all into the 2021 class, which I think is a mistake overall. I think that this class is extremely weak. And he gives up Mike Gesicki. He also gave up Darren Waller on a previous trade, so now I think his tight end situation is all over the place. Hopefully, maybe he's thinking he can pick up Pitts with the 106. But it's going to be tough for him. I think that in his mind, he needed to get a stud from this class. He didn't have a high enough draft pick, despite having 4 of them in 2021, to get a kind of what you're calling this lock prospect in Jamar Chase. But as we just said, it's a little bit in doubt as how much of a slam dunk he is. So I just give him a B+. I just like the move from him, this aggressive nature that Justin went for.
Okay, but what do you build around to like create a contending team in Dynasty?
I mean, that's up to the owners. Like, okay, we think
No, it's not. It's obviously running backs. Like, you need running backs to have a chance in this league, and he does not have a running backs. You know what he has? He has Brandon Ayuk, and that is literally it. Like, nothing else.
He's got Will Fuller.
He has like his next best players are Fuller, Slayton, and Marquise Brown. And what do they all have in common?
They're wide receivers.
They're all wide receivers. So what
fast.
does he do? He trades all of his draft capital to get another wide receiver, something that he clearly doesn't need, and has now have another redundant asset on his team.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he's hoping Drew doesn't pick Najee or Etienne. Who knows?
Yes, which we all know is not going to happen because Drew literally just traded away Cam Akers. So I think it's unlikely that he's not taking 2 running backs there. I don't think he makes that move.
Yeah.
I don't think he makes that move unless he knows he's getting 2 running backs.
You're right about that. I actually didn't think about that. That's a good point.
Thank you, Cassidy. So yeah, I don't see the move as being very helpful in what I would classify as a rebuild situation for him. I think the best thing that comes out of this for him is that he was able to move those first-round picks, because we know that he's terrible at taking first-round picks, seeing that he took Tua and Henry Ruggs last year in the first. So at least he won't have the devastation and shame of taking terrible first-round picks. So at least he has that going for him.
Right, it's more of a lock, I guess. But he's being aggressive. He's going all in on 2021. I almost running backs are the core that you need, but if you have these wide receivers that he has, they have a longer shelf life and longevity than running backs do, right? So maybe running backs can be the last piece that you add to an already stacked team. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there.
No, but I think what you do need to have in a rebuild is you need several hits at the same time, and you need to have several shots to take those hits. Like, you need to start hitting on guys that line up their timeline nicely so that you have a window of contention. And that requires you having multiple picks. I don't think he has that anymore because he traded them all away. So that's not a move I would make, especially because he is literally the second lowest scoring team of all time in this league. So moving up for one player is not going to help that because he needs help entire roster. So again, I don't agree with your B+.
You've kind of convinced me. I should have lowered it. Is Drew the lowest scoring?
Actually, don't know.
I would assume.
I'm assuming.
Yeah, I would assume it's Drew. So I'm going to just give Dagger the lowest scoring because he took over just an awful mess of an orphan. So really,
yes,
Dagger's
Drew is the lowest scoring.
Okay, so Dagger's the lowest scoring. All right, good job, Justin. I've been convinced officially that you are dog shit. So woof woof.
Real quick, because I think we just skimped over Brett. Brett also, awful trade for him. Real quick, he's clearly a contender. He has Patrick Mahomes, who on a points per game basis was the QB1 and is probably going to be in the upper echelon of quarterbacks and have that positional advantage going forward for the next 10 plus years. Then he has Boyd, who was wide receiver 17 before Burrow got hurt, and Cooper Kupp, who finished at wide receiver 27. So you have those wide receiver core. So there's pieces to build around. Unlike Justin's team, which is depleted of talent, he has actual like contending pieces. What he needs is running backs. And I think how he could have gotten those running backs was through this 103 pick and trading that to other players. I think it's going to be harder to move these first-round picks because there's not a lot of value in this league towards first round picks. So I think it's going to be a little hard for him too. I think he should have flipped that for RB1, and that would have put him straight into contention. But now he just has a bunch of picks, and we'll see what he does with it.
Yeah, you're right about that. He definitely lacks running back strength. Right now, he's starting Connor, Mack, and Singletary as his big three, which I don't know if any of them are even going to be an RB2 this year, to be honest. So it'll be interesting. He still has those picks that he's acquired right now from Justin to flip flop for value, and hopefully he can make a move to acquire a running back that way, because that is the side that he needs help with. You just mentioned that Patrick Mahomes has 10 plus years, so he has time to build. I mean, I suppose he always wants to be in contention because he has Mahomes and wants to take advantage of every single year as a Mahomes owner. But this is his move.
But again, yes, that leads him to what we talked about before, where he needs. I think he's in this gray area of whether or not he is a contender or he's in a rebuild. And if he is in a rebuild, then I think he needs to dump some of those higher receivers that are getting up there in age, reaching that age apex of 27, 28. Get rid of them and get more picks back or younger players. So then he can actually start the rebuild. If he is going for contention, then he needs to trade those picks as soon as possible to get a running back to make a run at it, because there's just nothing there.
Yeah,
you're not going to win. You're not going to win any games with James Conner and Devin Singletary.
Boyd and Cup, though, they're both slot guys, and they do live longer. They're going to produce for several more years than your typical wide receivers in these wide receiver 2 ranges. That's just my take.
I mean, I fair enough. I feel like those are pieces to help. Those are like substitutional pieces that'll help you win championships, but they're not pieces that you build around.
Right. All right, that was trade 1. B. Morgan and Justin was a pretty impactful big ticket trade that we saw on the docket. We'll be moving on here. Trade number 2 is yours truly. I received Adam Troutman and the 305 from my division partner, Rich Crew 24K. Hopefully Rich gets a little bit more involved. He's been in a few trades in this league, but he's a little bit MIA a lot of times. He picked up Tariq Cohen and Peyton Barber because he needed running back help. I knew that he needed running back help because I had sent several trades for Justin Jefferson, and he was like, need RB. So this is what I came up with. I needed tight end help behind Dallas Goedert. I think Adam Troutman is a smash in this case. Jared Cook is gone, although Drew Brees is gone. They're still going to run through with, he's going to be the first option at tight end, and maybe only Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara will be receiving options above Troutman. We'll see about Traquan Smith and what happens with him and if they draft anyone. But I have high hopes for this guy. He was, I think, a third-round pick last year, and tight ends, take a couple years, so maybe this is it. I also think that just Troutman here wins me this trade, but I was able to pry the 305 in and throw in Peyton Barber, who I don't know if he's going to be impactful at all.
Harkening back to 2 things you said. First, I think you called me egotistical at one point, and I can see here that you gave yourself an A.
This is an A.
Okay, we'll move on from that. Secondly, you said that Rich needed running back help. I don't feel like that was addressed in this trade, unless you're looking at different running backs than I am.
Tariq Cohen
he acquired Tariq Cohen and Peyton Barber.
RB12 in 2018, by the way, in PPR leagues. RB12. 2 years ago. Okay?
2 years ago?
Yeah.
2 years ago. We're not 2 years ago. We have Andy Dalton at quarterback, which, again, I'm not saying, that's a, decrease from Mitchell Trubisky, but this offense just looks awful.
Gonna be a lot
also,
of
I think you saw a lot more. You saw a lot more of David Montgomery getting involved in the passing game, so I don't know what his role is going to be coming back to.
Because Tariq Cohen had an ACL injury.
Which, again, he's coming back from an ACL injury, which is not another knock on him. So there's a lot of things not working in his favor, I feel like. His offense is just not going to be able to score points. So, I understand maybe as an RB2 or a flex play on bye weeks, he has some floor maybe because he catches balls, but again, we don't know what role he's coming back to, and it doesn't mean that the Bears can address running back in the draft. They also brought in
Damian Williams,
who
I own.
I'm just saying, not high hopes for Tariq Cohen. And then Peyton Barber is just one of the worst running backs. It's probably Kalen Ballage and then Peyton Barber. Quick stat, out of 256 running backs that I've rated over the last 3 years, Peyton Barber ranked 220th in 2019 and 221st in 2020. So basically he sucks. So again, I don't see that he addresses running backs here.
Peyton Barber sucks, so does Rich in this trade. I should have made him an F, you're right. We have myself again. I got Cam Akers, and I did this. You know what? Well, let's just look at the details first. I got Cam Akers. Drew got an absolute haul. The 111, the 311 this year, 222 firsts, and the 22 second. Those are mine and David's, and hopefully with the addition of Cam Akers, that makes me a playoff contender. David was the runner-up, or was in the semifinals this year. I think he was in the semifinals this year for the championship. So also contender with an older team. Hopefully those 22 firsts and those picks in the future end up in the back end. That's kind of my hope and my thinking going into this. I addressed a running back room, which was already my strength with Saquon, JT, and Dobbins, and I made it even stronger by adding Akers there. I made an aggressive move, and I think I gave myself a B minus here without that egotistical mindset that Alex so willingly brought up there. Because I did lose value, in a strict player and pick sense. I think that I did overpay here for Cam Akers, but it's my intention to make it to the playoffs and win my division with Akers. So that's my mindset.
I think you brought up a good point about a normal first round pick in our league is different than a typical 12-team league because there's 16 teams, so each one of those picks keeps getting pushed back, especially in value. So as you said, that whatever happened, if you were a playoff team in 2022, then that first round pick is a second rounder, a 202 or 203 in a normal league. So I don't think those picks are as valuable as long as you are a contending team, which it seems like you're going to be.
That's the hope, though. But so I went into this year also intending to be a contender, and you had my first, and it ends up being the 105. Now, thankfully, this class is absolute dog shit. This class is fucking dog shit. But
Disagree.
a 105, you disagree with that?
Yeah, but we'll move on. We're talking about the trades.
Oh my god. Okay. So I lost the 105 when I thought that I would have been a playoff team, and that hurts really badly for Brian Edwards. But in this sense, I'm still making an aggressive move. I don't feel like I was incredibly too burned by that in a move where I know that I'm getting Cam Akers, who I think is a top 5 dynasty asset right now. So
I think it goes back to kind of what we're talking about with a Justin and Brett trade and deciding whether or not you're a rebuilding team or you're a contending team or something in the middle. You identified yourself as a contending team, and there's only a small window where you're going to be at like the top of the league, and you want to capitalize on that. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And trying to go all in at those times, it makes sense to overpay at those situations, especially as we discussed, building around running backs. So running backs you have to pay for in this league, especially like a good running back like Cam Akers. Once he began seeing 60% snap share in week 12, he averaged 22 attempts, 3 targets, and 110 yards. He's also really good on Twitter. He had a hilarious tweet yesterday. Check it out.
yeah.
So all good things about Cam Akers. I understand why you overpaid.
You
and then the same.
You read all these stats off, and all I heard was maybe a hidden compliment in there for me. But thank you, Alex. I didn't know you think so highly of me.
Not a hidden compliment. This was a very, very straightforward compliment. Good trade on both sides. This was a win-win. Going back to Drew's part, I think he classified himself as a rebuilding team. He's going to get 2 stud running backs that will hopefully help out his rebuilding process. And then he did exactly what I said you need to do if you are a rebuilding team, and that's just get a bunch of assets so that you can start trying to hit on take a bunch of shots so you can find some hits. And if somebody's willing to overpay for the running backs, perfect. That's what happened, and he capitalized on it. So I think win-win for both parties in this trade.
You heard it here first. Kudos to Drew from both Cass and Alex. I think you're right, and this is what Justin kind of tried to do. You sent an offer that the other owner could not pass up on, right? Like Brett felt like he got an offer that he could not pass up on because of the value, and so that's what I sent.
Again, context. Justin has wide receivers. Why are you going after another wide receiver?
Well, I'm saying
it doesn't make sense,
right? Yeah, because Brett's the one who gave up the prized piece, and so is Drew here. So I'm saying like Justin, and both offers, by the way, both trade offers came from the person who was sending the haul, right? That's why there was an overpay. Because I sent an overpay to Drew and Justin sent an overpay to Brett, theoretically. So we're sending these hauls to go and get these prized assets. Last and final trade of the day we got here, trade number 4 between Brandog Caridi and Drew Soleil. I forgot to put in this little question mark. It is the 209. Because we weren't sure which second round pick this was. I thought it was the 201 initially, because it just says teammate on the computer. And I thought maybe Brandog, 201, that's pretty good. Or at least almost fair for him, but it ends up being the 209. And so I give Brandog a C minus. I think he severely overpaid for a player that is not going to be worth it in a tight end premium league, and in a league where he has Antonio Gibson and the handcuff, a very quality handcuff who has a lot of passing down work and has standalone value. So I don't think Brandog earned any value here. I'm not sure who he's even trying to target. I know he wants a quarterback. I know he likes the likes of Kadarius Toney. Oh my God, he likes Kadarius Toney. But don't know who he wants. Pat Frymuth, I don't know, but here he is.
We'll correct you and say that J.D. McKissic is not a handcuff of Antonio Gibson.
Well,
that's just not true.
I said he had a standalone value too. Oh, but okay.
we don't even know if that's true. He had one good season.
Yeah.
He hasn't done anything like. That's probably like that 2018, 2017 Chris Thompson season, where just like all the stars aligned and he just happened to be like super involved in this game.
Or that 2018 Tariq Cohen season that we mentioned earlier.
Exactly. Yeah. Where those seasons don't tend to follow up. So we'll see what JD McKissic does. I don't think it matters that much for this, like, for Drew. Like, okay, if McKissic hits, he hits. I think he got enough value back regardless. And again, it's going back to that thing about just like, if you're a real rebuilding team, just taking more shots, so you can try to align more hits. Which at the end, I think is what he did. Evan Ingram is a relatively young player still, and Drew really needed a tight end, so he addressed that. And he only gave up a 209. So I think the theme of this first trade winners and losers is Drew is definitely the big winner.
Oh, Drew smashed so far, and he hasn't done anything. He's just been receiving offers. In fact, he got Brett's 101. Is it the 101 or 102 this year that was Brett's pick? I don't even remember. It might have been the 101. Yeah, Brett had the 101 this year, and he offered it to Drew for Marlon Mack. It was that trade, right? He had given up, I can't even remember, I think Samuel and a first-round pick for Marlon Mack, something to that extent. So Drew is just racking up all the offers. He came in as an orphan, and he's earned so much and accrued so much value here.
Yeah, if we've achieved anything today, I think the biggest thing is that people no longer trade with Drew. That's my hope, anyways. Stop trading with Drew. But let's get back to Brandon real quick. I know that you definitely didn't like it. I'm not as down on it as you were. Again, this is going back to what I said earlier about redundant assets. If you have two tight ends, you're not going to need two tight ends. I think he might feel a little bit more comfortable with his tight ends than I may view them. But if he does like two tight ends that he has on his team with, I think, is it...
he has Higbee.
Does he have?
He has Higbee.
Higbee, who's gonna take a huge bump up with Everett gone and Stafford in that offense, and then he has Albert O. So I think he feels comfortable at his tight ends.
You're saying Albert O? At that point, you have to means anything. All right, go ahead.
Just saying, he feels like he's a contender, which means he needs to take shots, which means he needs to move redundant assets, which I think is what he tried to do here. Plus, I talked to him a bit. He said he has a plan in the second round, so I'm going to reserve judgment on it until I see what he does with it, which I know is giving him the benefit of the doubt, but I'm less down on it than you are.
Albert O. You know who's above Albert O on the Denver Broncos? Yeah, no offense.
I understand that.
You know who else is above Albert O. Okwuegbunam on the Denver offense? Jake Butt. The guy's last name is Butt, and he's above the depth chart.
No. Yeah. Jake Butt is definitely not above Albert O. I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Dude, this guy is buried behind Jake Butt. Get me out of this. Brandon needed Evan Ingram. It doesn't matter if you already have Higbee. It's a tight end premium league. You can start him in a flex. If Ingram hits, he might be the only good receiver this year on that offense.
Evan Ingram?
Yes.
He just got Kenny Golladay. What are you talking about?
Oh, I forgot about Kenny Golladay. He might be the only good receiver besides Kenny G on that offense.
Sterling Shepard?
No.
Okay. Moving on. Again, I agree. And I think the Giants offense is another ascending offense potentially. Bringing in Kenny Golladay, getting Saquon back. So again, I think there's going to be potential for a huge touchdown. improvement on Evan Ingram's part, but I think that you can also agree with this, that if you have redundant assets, looking at Brett's team, who has Patrick Mahomes, who is the QB1, and Ryan Tannehill at the QB9, you have to start moving those pieces if you want to like capitalize on your maximum point output. Like, there's no reason to have two tight ends. You're not going to play two tight ends. So I understand the logic behind it. While I would have hoped that he would have got more value, I can understand what he was trying to do. Is all I'm saying.
Should we do a what?
Takeaway. What was your takeaway from today's episode?
That Drew won. I think he did the takeaway quite well.
No. I think that could be the ending. I know one. The spitballers do it. We could just make that our ending for now.
Oh, like reflective pieces.
I'll just say, okay, that'll wrap it up. We'll end with, what was your big takeaway from today's episode?
Okay, what was your big takeaway?
Wait, I gotta think of my takeaway first. Are you gonna use the Drew thing?
No, that's your thing. I feel like that's your thing. You brought it up.
Okay, then you need to come up with a takeaway.
I have a takeaway.
What's your takeaway?
My takeaway is that no.
But is this actually happening?
Yeah. It's been happening. I think you do better.
We're still talking.
I think you do better when you know you're not being recorded.
I don't think I do. Are you saying that I did not do well?
No, you did. I thought you did excellently.
Thank you. I thought you did excellently.
Thank you. My takeaway is that you should kind of take a hard look at your team. And this is an Ian quote. He's like, let me take a hard look at my roster and see where I'm going with this. And then he never gets back to you, but I'm going to get back to you here. So you need to take a hard look at your team and realistically identify, are you going to contend this year? Are you going to try to make the playoffs this year? And if not, are you going to be able to trade away these assets for future picks, right? Because you don't want to be stuck in mediocrity. You don't want to be stuck in the middle. That's the worst place to be. You need to know which direction to take your team. I think Drew knows where he's at. I think Brett might be in the middle, and he needs to figure that out. I think I know where I'm at with this. Who else did trades today? And Brandon, Drew knows where he's at. Brandon, I still don't. Brandon feels like he should be a contender, but trading for the 209 doesn't make sense for me in this trade. So that's my takeaway.
And I will agree with that. That's a great takeaway. And I think that in itself provides the context to whether or not a trade is a winner or a loser. I will say, I think there is something in between where you're going to take the wait and see approach, which is also a possibility, where you can see how the first few games play out before deciding whether or not you're going to rip up the team. So yeah, it's not binary. It's not black and white, whether you're in it or out of it. I think you can also see where the season goes.
Thanks, everybody. That was the Magma Chamber. Thanks for being on here with me, Alex.